What do you do when your fiancée turned wife asks her ex to walk her down the aisle, then says, because, as if that is enough? How do you stand straight while families clap and group chats rewrite the scene as romance? Can quiet documentation and one lawful action end a public script that tried to cast you as the villain? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Quillan Voss, and I will speak softly because loud voices break promises. The request sounded simple. She wanted her ex to walk her down the aisle. She said it was tradition. She said it was about closure. I stood in the kitchen and watched the kettle breathe. 2 mugs waited on opposite counters like flags on a map. I placed our ring box on the table and slid it to the center. I asked what the reason was. She said because. I wrote the word in my notebook and let the pen stop. I kept my hands still. I turned to the wall planner and circled a date in red. A sticky note said, "Bring forms," and I pressed it flat. My phone showed a silent ribbon, downtown 9:40 a.m., and I let it fade. I opened a spreadsheet with initials and dates, added a time, then minimized the window when footsteps crossed the hall. A single USB labeled clicked into the locked drawer. The sound settled me. I chose the guest room over an argument. I checked the window latch and the quiet street. I told myself to record facts, protect dignity, and handle everything properly. I came back from the florist with ribbon on my sleeve and quiet in my mouth. The kitchen held its patience the way good rooms do. I set the bouquet on the counter and made space around it so petals were not crowded. 2 mugs waited on opposite counters, one near the kettle and one by the fruit bowl. I left them where they were. I put the ring box in the center of the table and turned it once, so the hinge faced the window. She stood by the sink with a face made for pictures. I asked what she wanted me to understand about the aisle. She said it was tradition. She said it was about closure. I asked what the reason was. She said because. I let the words settle between us like a coin that refused to land on either side. I chose to breathe instead of argue. I counted to 5 while the kettle began to sound like a small storm. I said, a wedding is a promise in public. I said the aisle is part of that promise. She said I was making a museum out of a party. She said modern love needs new symbols. I said symbols do not erase lines. I said lines exist to keep a room honest. She laughed without warmth and asked if we were back to rules. I said yes, because rules protect respect. She looked past me toward the bouquet and called the flowers safe choices. I agreed. I prefer safe when other people prefer danger on a stage. I poured water into 1 mug and left the other dry. I did not explain it. I have learned that small maps help when big words do not. I carried the ring box to the wall planner and set it on the small ledge below the dates. I circled a day in red and did not press too hard. I placed a sticky note on the fridge that read, "Bring forms." I pressed the edges so it would not curl. My phone showed a silent ribbon I had set earlier. Downtown 10:20 a.m. Meeting, personal. I let it pass without sound. I opened my laptop at the small desk and brought up a spreadsheet with initials and dates. I added 2 times from today and 1 short note. I'll ask, word used, because. I minimized the window when footsteps crossed behind me. I am not hiding. I am protecting context from being read as a verdict. She said her mother would be thrilled and that people would cry. I said tears without sense are cheap. She said I would ruin the story if I kept acting like a guard. I said I would keep the room safe. She asked if I was jealous of a walk. I said I was careful with a promise. She shook her head, lifted her phone, and practiced a smile that needed no witness. I watched the kettle steam fade. I dried the counter with a clean towel and folded it once. Then again, because clean lines help the next hour. I opened the small drawer, placed a single USB labeled with today's date inside, and turned the key. The lock clicked once and calmed my breath. I flipped the mail so the address is face down and slid 1 unsealed envelope into the outbox tray. I adjusted the binder labeled Utilities so the spine aligned with household and bank. I slid a clear sleeve into bank and closed the cover. I prefer space made ready before space is needed. I checked the bouquet again and moved it an inch away from the sun to keep the water cool. I wrote in my notebook, keep voice low, avoid public scenes, protect schedule, keep records kind. In the bedroom, I placed a folded blanket at the foot of the bed and positioned a spare pillow under the lamp base to stop the small wobble. I set a glass of water on the nightstand and left it untouched. The guest room door stood slightly open, the way a door does when a house is deciding what it wants. I walked in and smoothed the sheet with my palm. The fabric remembered other nights of distance and did not complain. I told myself that order is not punishment. Order is oxygen. I checked the window latch and the quiet street below. A single car idled and then went away. I closed the curtain by 2 inches and left the room with the light off. Back in the kitchen, she said her sister already had a post idea. The caption would say, "Healing, Tradition, and Grown-Up Choices." I said, "Captions are not courts." She said the audience decides anyway. I said, "Truth survives without an audience." She sighed like a person who has learned to enjoy the weight of other people's attention. I rinsed my mug and left it upside down on the rack. I set the dry mug by the fruit bowl and stepped back until the map made sense again. I checked the calendar on my phone and added a second quiet entry. Downtown, 8:55 a.m. Drop-off. I set a silent alarm labeled paper drop for a day I would not name out loud. I closed the phone and put it face down near the wall, not in the center of anything. I took one photo of the wall planner with the red circle and one photo of the sticky note. I saved them to a hidden album that means nothing to anyone but me. A cloud badge flashed "File uploaded successfully" and slid away. I closed the gallery and wiped the lens on my shirt because clean lenses stop accidents. She asked if I was going to the tux fitting. I said yes, and that I would be on time. She said Evan would be there too to test the pace. I said I would stand where the aisle requires me to stand. She said I did not have to be defensive. I said I was being precise. In the stairwell, the air smelled like cleaner and dust that had been given a job. I made a short call with headphones on. I used short sentences and no names. I described only what had already happened and what must be protected. I said I was not seeking a fight, only a record. I said schedules would be kept. I ended the call when the door on the next landing opened and closed. I do not make scenes in shared spaces. I returned to the apartment and placed the notebook under the desk lamp. I checked the ring box once more and closed it with a quiet click. The click felt like a promise to myself. She moved past me with a dress bag hooked on 2 fingers. She said people would finally see who I was if I kept this up. I said people already see who I am when I keep the rules that keep them safe. She said I should smile in photos, even if I disagreed. I said I would not lie with my face. She laughed and said I was dramatic. I said I was careful. The refrigerator hummed a steady note. The bouquet breathed slowly in the dim light. The room held. I wrote one last line in the notebook. Do not argue, record, protect dignity. Handle it properly. I underlined properly once. I pressed the sticky note "Bring forms" a second time. Not harder, just more sure. I placed my wallet and keys on the dresser and noticed a small new key on the ring that did not belong to house, car, or mailbox. I turned it once between finger and thumb and set it down. I would remember its teeth in the morning, when light is better for reading small things. I stood in the hallway and listened to the building find its usual sound. Morning arrived with the steady rhythm of alarms and lists, and I welcomed it because lists do not lie. I brewed coffee, packed a simple lunch, and set our 2 mugs on opposite counters again, not to provoke, only to map distance in a way a tired mind can understand. I checked the wall planner and traced the red circle with a fingertip without adding pressure. Nate's spelling sheet waited under a magnet shaped like a small train, and I left it undisturbed. I placed the ring box in a drawer, not hidden, just out of the light. On my phone, a thin ribbon slid across. Downtown, 9:40 a.m., meeting personal. I let it pass. I breathed in for 4 and out for 6, turned the deadbolt, and walked the quiet hallway to the stairs because elevators speak to crowds and stairs speak to one person at a time. The hospital facility's office hummed with fluorescent certainty and the dependable hiss of vents. I hung my jacket, logged in, and opened the route board. Maintenance tickets needed sorting, a valve inspection at the East Wing requested a time, an elevator test on 12 had to align with patient transport windows. I answered what I could answer and put the rest in a line they could trust. The cursor blinked across the screen like a metronome reminding my hand to keep time with its own purpose. I created 2 folders on my desktop and named them Archive A and Archive B. I copied the spreadsheet with initials and dates into both and added yesterday's time marks. Florist at 08:15, I'll ask recorded at 19:02, word used, because. I kept adjectives out. I minimized the sheet when a chair leg scraped behind me. A link dropped into the general chat for our floor, shared by someone who treats speed like virtue. It was Ivy's new reel, a clip from rehearsal drinks that cut around silence and glued on a caption about love honoring the past. My face appeared between heaters for 2 seconds, not smiling, which the comments interpreted as a position. I did not click into the thread. I took 2 screenshots, stamped them with the time, saved them to Archive A, copied them to Archive B, and returned to the work tickets because vents do not read reels. The printer across the room coughed a single blank page into its tray before producing a shipping label for parts. I left the blank where it landed. Machines sometimes confess the room's stress and then carry on. Mira from HR sent a quiet message asking if I could step in for a neutral check-in regarding public content and workplace comfort. I replied with 10:15. The HR room smelled like paper with a job and carpet that knew not to shout. She asked if my environment felt safe, and I said yes. She asked if I needed any specific support, and I said my focus remained on schedules, not side stories. We kept words plain. We ended in 8 minutes, 2 signatures not required, 2 people committed to keeping the building from being used for drama. On my way out, I noted the clock and wrote the time in my pocket notebook in a neat corner, because times are facts that do not argue back. Dmitri tapped the edge of my cubicle and asked for a quick word later. His face carried concern and the usual warehouse calm. He said noise had reached him from outside the building, and he wanted to make sure operations stayed clean. I said my intention is to keep schedules and safety intact. He said we would speak after lunch. I wrote his plan in my notes with a single underline. My phone buzzed face down with a call labeled private, which I let pass without touching. I noted the minute, underlined it once, and slid the note back. The building needed light fixtures signed off on 12. I signed and then sent the tech with a clear route around patient corridors. At noon, I went to the supermarket because ordinary shelves steady a mind. The aisles formed a slow river of decisions. I chose rice, bread, fruit, and dish soap, then stood in line behind a woman who read a receipt like it contained a story she wanted to remember. The cashier's phone under the counter lit with a group chat, and my surname sat in the preview like a hinge between laughing faces. She bagged items quickly and set 2 fragile things together. I separated them when they slid to me, and she nodded in a way that belonged to quiet people who notice and adjust. I wrote the printed time on the receipt and added a 2-word note, checkout ping. Outside, a delivery truck idled near the curb with a door half open. I stepped wide because safety often looks like boredom to people who prefer a camera. Back at my desk, Ivy's poll had become a story sticker asking if men who love control should learn to let go at weddings. The results leaned the way a public room leans when it is tired of nuance. I took screenshots again, filed them to Archive A, copied them to Archive B, and reopened the maintenance queue. A message from a cousin arrived through a family thread with a smiling photo of Tessa and Evan standing arm in arm at the community center aisle tape. The caption said closure, the comments said romantic. One line asked if I had agreed yet. I closed the thread. I do not correct crowds with my thumbs. I repair buildings with my hands and keep time with my mind. In the supply room, I taped a small USB under the inside lid of a folder labeled Taxes, a place no one borrows in an emergency. The tape caught on the first try. I pressed it once more to be sure. In the corridor, a gurney rolled past, pushed by 2 techs with good posture and an understanding that corners can be dangerous when speed pretends to be kindness. I stepped aside first and thanked them, because the work of moving human bodies safely deserves respect every hour of the day. One of them looked at my face like he half recognized it from somewhere he didn't want to name, then kept going, which was merciful to us both. In the afternoon, a courier dropped a box of filters, and the printer did its blank page cough again before printing the manifest. I left the blank alone and signed the page that mattered. I checked my calendar and adjusted the silent entry to downtown 1:25 p.m. Meeting, but personal to avoid a conflict with a valve inspection handoff. I set a second silent reminder labeled paper drop for tomorrow, time unset. I opened the Notes app and wrote 4 lines without adjectives. Aisle walk proposed by X, family reaction favorable, public real names groom cold, work impact minimal so far. I closed the app and set the phone face down where sunlight could not study it. The floor's chatter rose and fell like a radio between stations. A junior tech tried to describe the reel to me with excitement he did not own. I said I had work. He said right and left with relief. Mira passed my row and gave a nod that meant we were both still inside procedure. Dimitri's message arrived a few minutes early. Let's step into the hallway now. As I stood, my phone lit with a stack of chat previews from Ivy's poll and a tagged story that used my first name in bold letters. The latest sticker asked if the groom should apologize for not being romantic about history. The hallway door eased shut behind us with a soft seal. The timing assembled itself without my help. I walked beside Dmitri with my notebook in my hand and my posture small. He said operations came first, and I said they would. He said keep the day clean, and I said that is the plan. A shuttle beeped somewhere below us like a cautious heart. I heard the elevator bell on the distant bank announce another floor accepting travelers. My phone vibrated once more in my pocket, but I did not reach for it because reaching would not improve the truth. I breathed. I watched the line of tiles recede like a measured path, and I thought about rails and aisles and who gets to lead whom and why. The rooftop rehearsal drinks unfolded on a tall building with glass rails and heaters that put a soft sheen on confidence, and I kept to the space beside the stair door because exits are the only arguments that never lie. The elevator delivered groups in bright clothes and borrowed moods. The host placed a chalkboard by the bar with the word tradition written like a verdict. I stayed with water, hands quiet, posture small. A staff badge brushed my sleeve and apologized without sound. The skyline held still like a witness that cannot be charmed. Tessa arrived with Ivy and 2 bridesmaids who had learned to hold phones like lanterns. Evan stood near the rail, jacket open, smile arranged to look unarranged. Tessa named closure the theme of the night and gestured at Evan as if he were a relic made for display cases. Ivy lifted her phone and panned across faces, lingering a half-second too long on mine, then moved away when stillness did not perform. A junior planner asked whether everyone was ready for the walkthrough, and someone clapped because clapping keeps rooms from thinking. I counted 3 heaters and the distance to the stair, 2 strides plus a pivot. I prefer numbers that repeat. A server offered sparkling water and olives, and I stepped aside to let a tray pass. Evan told a short story about first love and lessons learned. The circle hummed on cue. Tessa said the aisle should honor history, and she called my concern resistance to romance. I kept my eyes on the hinge of the stair door and recited a short list in my head. Facts, times, exits. Ivy asked the group if the modern heart needed permission. Phones nodded like small animals trained for treats. I wrote the words permission and closure in a draft I would not send. My phone showed a silent ribbon. Downtown, 7:20 p.m. Meeting, personal. I let it slide and opened my browser for a glance at 3 quiet tabs. Storage options, delivery tracking, notary near me, then closed the screen. At the welcome table, a clipboard lay open with a page that said only statement at the top. No lines, no logo, only the word. I set a fingertip to the corner, then left it where it was, because symbols should not be moved unless purpose is ready. The planner called for a practice circle, and the group pressed toward the rail for a view that flattered itself. Ivy asked for an official rehearsal toast before the hall run-through. People made a semicircle with a gap where I stood by the stair, as if the room had sketched my boundary for me. Evan positioned his elbow near Tessa's hand and said the walk would be gentle and respectful, then added a line about gratitude to everyone who understands history. The phrase performed work it did not earn. I watched the wind lift a napkin and fail to carry it away. A junior cousin, imported for content, not blood, asked if I felt secure now that I had seen the elegance of the plan. I said I prefer rules that defend everyone equally. He said rules ruin stories. I said stories can live inside rules that guard respect. He smiled in the way people smile when they intend to cut a clip into a lesson. I returned my water to the table and kept my shoulders square to the door. The elevator bell chimed once, a metronome that keeps rooms honest. We moved to the community center hall for the tape dial. The floor wore blue painter's lines that measured decisions. Folding chairs made 2 small C's with a clear channel between them. A coordinator asked for phones down for one dry run. Phones were lowered halfway and then rose again like habits that refuse retirement. Tessa took Evan's arm and walked the tape with practiced slowness, while Ivy narrated healing into the air. A murmur traveled the chairs like heat. Someone whispered that the groom looked cold. I let the whisper pass as if it had been assigned to someone else's day. I stood near the rear where doors could open fast if the room forgot its manners. A child in a bow tie asked his mother why a man from before gets to lead a bride to a man for now. The mother said something about kindness and chapters. I kept my eyes on the exit bar and said nothing. The coordinator reset the start and asked for one more pass in slow motion for content clarity, which is how people ask the present to cooperate with future edits. I marked the second hand on the wall clock and watched it meet a minute that would still be true tomorrow. Evan offered a short speech about their history as proof that trust remains after romance ends. He did not mention that some forms of trust cannot carry 2 families at once. Tessa said I did not understand generosity. I said generosity should not require a script that erases the groom. She said I was turning a celebration into a trial. I said a trial tests facts. I am recording them. The coordinator clapped twice and asked the room to save debate for later. The room saved nothing. It moved on without deciding. Back on the rooftop for one final round of drinks, the city light thinned into gold and then into something that forgives poor choices. Ivy announced a toast to closure and called my name as a test. I held my place. Evan lifted his glass and said he was honored to be trusted with the aisle. Phones tilted to catch Tessa's face full of practiced grace. Someone bumped a heater, and it hissed, then calmed. The clipboard sat where it had been, statement still staring from the top page. I counted 7 bulbs along the parapet and 6 gaps between them, because counting keeps nonsense from multiplying. I opened my notes and added 4 entries without adjectives. Tape walk executed. History used as approval tool. Crowd called groom cold. Second pass requested for content. I closed the app and placed my phone face down. A server asked me if I wanted anything stronger for the toast. I said water was enough. He said water keeps a man even. I thanked him because a true sentence deserves acknowledgement when you hear one. The chant began for 1 more walk, and Tessa smiled toward the circle like a curtain call. Evan checked his watch and made a face that told the room he was generous with time. A bridesmaid practiced a spin with her camera to catch both of them and the skyline. The host adjusted the speaker volume, and the word tradition rolled out like a theme song. I kept my feet set and my hands still. Ivy asked if I wanted a line in the toast. I did not answer, because sometimes refusal is better as a shape than as a sentence. A flash exploded from a phone near the rail and wiped edges for a beat. Laughter arrived like foam and then slid away. In the quiet between cheer and next command, the elevator bell sounded again behind the stair door, exactly on the half-minute, as if the building itself had chosen to keep time for us. My phone vibrated in my pocket. The preview showed my name in bold inside a group tag and the word apologize next to it. I let the screen dim. I lifted my glass of water the height of a breath and set it down without drinking. The rehearsal dinner chose a family restaurant that wore its comfort like a promise. Framed sailboats, soft bulbs, and a long table that turned conversation into a stage. Place cards already told us who we were supposed to be. The banner for congratulations curved over the chairs like a smile that did not ask permission. I chose the end seat by the wall where I could see both the entrance and the kitchen door. The server set water and bread and explained the specials with the steadiness of someone who has learned to carry other people's nights without breaking them. Tessa sat near the center where cameras like to rest. Ivy rearranged phones into a neat arsenal and tested angles before speaking. Marta lifted her chin like a conductor waiting for a cue. Evan stood across from Tessa and rehearsed his modest posture as if he had invented it. Small talk started the way small talk always starts, but it veered as soon as someone used the word tradition with confidence. A cousin told a short story about romantic gestures. The table hummed approval. Ivy announced that followers wanted a behind-the-scenes look at the healing aisle, and her tone made the phrase sound market-tested. Marta explained that honoring the past made the future stronger, then looked at me as if I were supposed to applaud. I said rules keep rooms safe. The plates arrived, and silverware set a rhythm against ceramic that would have been pleasant if words did not try to ride it. I poured water for the youngest at the table first, for myself second, and left room for air between glasses because air stops elbows from becoming arguments. Between salad and mains, Ivy showed a clip of Tessa and Evan walking the taped aisle. The audio spoke the word closure like a refrain. Laughter arrived where the edit placed it. A friend of a friend asked whether I was ready to be generous on the big day. I said generosity and erasure are not the same posture. He looked down as if the menu could rescue him from hearing a sentence. Marta said I should avoid being rigid. She used the word husband like a reminder I had not earned. Tessa smiled at the group and said I was learning to loosen my grip. I said I did not hold a grip, I held a line. The server refilled water and set down a basket of warm rolls as if heat could soften decisions. I broke one roll and completed eating it before speaking again because finishing a small thing teaches the body to respect endings. When the cake appeared early with sparkler candles for a cousin's birthday, the room remembered how to agree. We sang. I clapped for the cousin and for the child who blew out 2 sparks with a single breath and looked proud of mathematics. Cameras turned to catch laughter and, finding my face still, decided to photograph other faces. The knife cut sugar into choices, and everyone took the size their appetite for attention could handle. I took a thin slice and left half of it on the plate. Tessa caught the lens that loved her and said the night was about love's capacity to hold the past. I summarized the sentence inside my head and put it in the drawer where I keep phrases that pretend to be laws. I excused myself and walked the short corridor to the restrooms because old tile and hand dryers always remember how to behave. Near the payphone, I unlocked my screen and added a quiet entry for later in the week. Downtown, 11:30 a.m. Meeting personal. No location, no invite. I set the alert to silent. I opened the gallery and confirmed the photo of the page with only the word statement at the top sat in the hidden album. The cloud badge had already flashed, file uploaded successfully earlier in the day, and left the screen clean. I returned to the sink, washed my hands longer than necessary, and told my face to come back to the table like a tool, not a conversation. At the table, a niece in a yellow dress asked why a man from before would lead a bride to a man for now. Her mother said it was kindness. The niece said kindness should not push someone aside. The room swallowed and looked for a new topic. I thanked the niece for asking an honest question with a voice that did not try to win anything. Ivy pivoted to a toast about adult choices. Glasses rose. Evan spoke about gratitude and said history teaches us to be generous. History also teaches lines, but that part did not fit tonight's plate. Marta leaned toward me and said she hoped I would not ruin the day for her daughter. I said I would keep the day safe for every person who has to live with it afterward. We drank water like it meant agreement. It only meant we were thirsty. After dinner, we walked to the riverside path because movement softens arguments better than dessert. The water carried city light in pieces that refused to form a single story. I matched my steps to the distance I needed. Tessa fell in beside me and said she hoped I could choose joy. I said joy travels well with boundaries. She said boundaries feel like walls when everyone is watching. I said walls keep crowds from falling into the river. She looked at the reflections as if they would lean toward her side. Evan trailed us by a few steps and practiced a nod to strangers. I counted lampposts to keep my mind standing up. Mr. Salas, our neighbor, happened to be at the path with a paper bag that held something harmless. He nodded once, the kind of nod that returns a person to themselves. He asked how the planning was going, and I said we were staying organized. He said organization keeps roofs in storms, then continued on without searching my eyes for gossip. I appreciated that sentence more than most compliments. A runner passed, and the wind made the runner's shirt sound like turning pages. Ivy's phone chimed with a group chat ping. She slowed to type a line that made her smile without apology. Back home, I placed the 3 binders, home, auto, bank, on the shelf with their spines in a straight margin. I slid a clear sleeve into bank and closed it. I flipped the mail so addresses face down and left the unsealed envelope in the outbox on purpose. I took a single photo of the wall planner's red circle and returned the marker to its bracket. I adjusted the sticky note bring forms so it did not cover tomorrow's list. In the den, the shredder hummed once and stopped as if reconsidering the appetite it had been given. The printer pulled a blank page and left it in the tray. I let the blank be a blank. At the doorway to the guest room, I smoothed the sheet with my palm and tucked the spare pillow under the lamp base to stop its wobble. Distance announced itself more clearly than a speech ever could. In the hallway, I tested the small new key on my ring in the lockbox. It turned cleanly, which told me that precision still exists in houses where phones try to rule. I put the key back and let my fist remember its weight. I wrote 3 lines in my notebook: rehearsal dinner script, niece's question, riverside walk, boundaries defined. I used no adjectives. Tessa came in with the smell of night air trying to be perfume. She said her mother would visit in the morning to help me understand the beauty of closure. I said visits are welcome when rules are respected. She said I was making her look bad. I said people look like whatever they do. She said she wished I would stop making everything into a document. I said documents keep lies from winning. She stared at the binders and said I was a wall. I said I was a door with a lock. I placed my phone face down on the counter and let the room settle. On the landing, footsteps paused outside our door, the breathing of someone who had lifted a hand and decided against knocking. My phone lit with a call labeled private, then went dark. A new banner from a thread named follow-up flashed a fragment and vanished as if the sender had lost courage mid-syllable. The building's elevator hummed far away like a slow punctuation mark. The parking garage held the kind of cool air that lets a mind line up its tools, and I stood beside Pillar C3 until the hum of the vent matched my breath. Concrete remembered last night's rain. I set a grocery bag in the trunk, lined the handles together, and closed it softly. Headphones rested around my neck, not for music, but as a small fence that says this call is serious. I did not start the call yet. I opened my notes and read the last clean lines. I'll request because. Niece question. Why past leads the present. Reels call groom cold. I added one more. Keep records kind. My phone slid a ribbon across the lock screen. Downtown 3:05 p.m. Meeting, personal. I let it pass. A call labeled private began and ended without a voice. I wrote the time on a small card and put the card back where honest minutes live. I started the call in short sentences with no names. I described what already happened and what must be protected. I said I am not asking for a fight. I am asking for order. I said a schedule for the morning matters more than a crowd's opinion. I said I will keep all steps lawful and precise. I ended the call and lowered the headphones so the world sounded like a room again. A sedan rolled by, slowed to see if I was a scene, then moved on when I failed to perform. I placed my palm on the car roof and told myself to make decisions I can repeat on paper. On the metro platform, the yellow line drew a bright rule across the floor. The train arrived with a soft push of wind. I stood by the window and watched my face reflect inside another life that kept moving even when reels tried to freeze moments. 2 teenagers practiced a brief dance and laughed when timing refused to help them. I opened the Notes app and typed, boundaries, schedules, dignity. I underlined dignity. A new notification offered the word storage options in the corner of a tab I had left open days ago. I closed the phone and let the tunnel give me a few seconds of darkness with no opinions on it. Home kept its edges. I washed my hands, I dried the sink until the metal shone, I flipped the mail so addresses face down and left the unsealed envelope in the outbox on purpose. I aligned the 3 binders, home, auto, bank, so their spines made a straight margin. In the small desk, I unlocked the drawer, placed a single USB labeled with today's date beside the others, and turned the key until the lock clicked once. The click always steadies me, the way a seatbelt does before the road decides to test attention. I opened the laptop. The spreadsheet with initials and dates waited where I left it. I added today's times and 2 plain notes. Dinner question from niece. Riverside path. Boundaries explained. I copied the file to Archive A, then to Archive B. I checked both timestamps. I minimized the window when footsteps crossed behind me. I am not hiding. I am preventing a draft from being mistaken for a verdict. Tessa came in with wind in her hair and said I was killing the romance. I said I was keeping respect. She said the world loved a generous groom. I said generosity is not erasure. She said I was making her look bad. I said people look like what they do. She said Ivy had a title for a new reel about men who fear history. I said reels fade and schedules remain. She called me a wall. I said I am a door with a lock. She took her phone from the counter and practiced a calm face for an audience that pays. I moved to the fridge and adjusted the sticky note bring forms so it did not cover Nate's list. I checked the wall planner and pressed the red circle once. Not harder, just more certain. I took 1 photo and saved it to the hidden album. A small cloud badge flashed file uploaded successfully and left the screen clean. In the den, the shredder hummed once and stopped, as if it had been fed air. The printer pulled a blank page and held it in the tray like a question I did not have to answer. I left it there. Rhea stepped in with a workbook Nate had forgotten. She asked if Saturday morning still worked. I said yes and thanked her for offering to extend to lunch. She nodded toward the guest room door without looking inside and said she would pick him up at 9. Mr. Salas passed in the hall and looked away with careful grace, the way neighbors do when decency means letting people keep their faces. I appreciated silence that had learned to be kind. I set 2 mugs on opposite counters again, not as a dare, only as a map. I made tea and left the other mug dry and upside down by the fruit bowl. Nate came out with a practice sheet and asked if we could do 10 minutes on the hard words now. I said yes. He sounded them out and corrected too by listening harder. I told him I admire correction. He smiled and asked if he could draw tracks on the back of the sheet later. I said yes. Permission is easy when it does not ask a person to betray themselves. After he returned to a book, I checked the new small key on my ring in the lockbox. It turned cleanly. I put it back and kept the shape in my fist for a second. I wrote 3 lines in the notebook on the desk. Rehearsal dinner script, niece truth, hall pause at door. No adjectives, only lines. I opened my browser and confirmed the quiet tabs were alive. Storage options, delivery tracking, notary near me. I closed them. I set the phone face down. Tessa recorded a story in the living room, calling boundaries cages and grace the only door worth walking through. She asked if I intended to keep this distance after the wedding day. I said distance is not a penalty, it is a tool. She asked if I plan to ruin the day with papers. I said I will handle it properly. She asked if that was a threat. I said it was a promise to stay lawful and precise. She said people will judge me for being cold. I said rooms grow warmer when rules are kept. She said her mother would come by to educate me on kindness. I said visits are welcome when rules are respected. She cut the recording and watched her own calm, as if calm were content. In the guest room, I smoothed the sheet and tucked the spare pillow under the lamp base to stop its wobble. I placed my wallet and keys on the dresser and noticed the small new key again. I turned it once between finger and thumb and set it down. I breathed in for 4 and out for 6. I told myself that order is not revenge. Order is oxygen. I went back to the kitchen and rinsed my mug. I left it upside down on the rack beside nothing else. I turned off the light and let the dark enter cleanly. In the hallway, the building's elevator bell sounded once, a clear chime that always lands like punctuation. My phone vibrated. Dimitri's message arrived with the exact words I expected. Need a quick word first thing. I replied with 1 line, confirming the time. I placed the phone face down and looked at Tessa. I said, I will handle it properly. I did not raise my voice. I let the sentence fill the room without decoration. The office tower lobby kept the morning like a rule, and I arrived early because process deserves steadiness. I confirmed Nate was with Clara and set my phone to accept only their calls. I stood near, not in, the main flow so strangers did not have to move around me. Security nodded once. A plant cart rolled by. The elevators opened and closed with the soft breath of a building doing its work. Tessa entered with Ivy 2 steps behind. The camera rose and then dipped when faces turned. Evan hovered by the directory, studying letters as if the names could shelter him. I did not step toward anyone. I did not perform. I waited for the hour to complete itself. An authorized server approached and verified identities with neutral phrases that asked for nothing but facts. Envelopes moved in the open. Acknowledgement was recorded. The documents served were a divorce petition with temporary financial and possession orders. Custody planning was implied by what took effect today. No speech from me, no raised voice from anyone. The lobby did not pause for our private history. A courier signed a clipboard. A barista set a drink on the ledge for someone whose name sounded like a bell. Life insisted on continuing while process found its exact shape. Tessa asked if I understood what I was doing. I said I was following procedure. She said I was cruel. I said I was being clear. Ivy lifted her phone again, then lowered it when a bystander shook a head. Evan shifted his stance and drifted a half-step farther from the directory. The server confirmed completion and stepped away with the same calm used for every other citizen. I folded my copy once and placed it inside a slim folder that did not bulge my jacket. I did not explain, apologize, or argue. Reasons belong on paper more than on air. I sent Clara a single word that meant on schedule. I checked the sightline to the exit because exits keep people honest. The guard returned to stillness. The lobby clock clicked. The building sounded like work beginning, which is exactly how endings should sound. I turned toward the doors when the elevator chimed the half hour, because there was nothing left to add that would improve the truth. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.